So the textbook definition of motivational interviewing is that it is a collaborative approach to therapeutic communication that promotes self-directed motivation for change. And each part of that definition is important, and we'll talk about it as we go along, but I want to highlight first, so collaborative. MI is collaborative. It is not directive, and you'll see that as we go along today. It is therapeutic communication. And what I like about, so hidden in there for me, or on therapeutic for me, therapeutic communication is intentional communication. We're not just chatting with someone, right? It's on purpose. If you cast your mind back to graduate school, maybe at one point in time you did one of those exercises where you look at a transcript of one of your sessions and you need to line by line say why you said what you said and how you were interpreting what someone else did, or maybe that's just something that I went through. But to me, what that really ingrained in me was that this is intentional, right? This isn't just chatting with a friend. We're doing this on purpose. So therapeutic communication that promotes self-directed or intrinsic motivation for change. This is not us telling someone what they should do. This is not us giving someone a reason to change or putting them on a burning platform. This is getting motivation from inside somebody out so that they can see it for themselves and use that as a driver to get what they want for their life. And the heart of MI, where it comes from and why we use it, is that we often experience ambivalence about change. And MI is about resolving that and motivating the change. Change is really tough, whether or not we're talking about cutting down on alcohol use, not using heroin anymore, changing our eating habits, changing our parenting habits. Change is tough. And particularly if we're leaving something that's very familiar to us. We like things that are familiar. Newness, some people really like newness and change, but those are the vast minority. Most of us actually really prefer what's familiar, sometimes to our own detriment, when we might be able to be doing things a little bit better with change. We stick with what we know. And so MI is about joining someone in that state of ambivalence and helping them resolve that for themselves. We like to leverage MI early on in the stages of change. So again, I know I'm speaking to an audience of therapists such as myself, so I won't go too deep into this, but for those who are a little less familiar or need a quick refresher, the idea of stages of change is that someone is not always ready to just dive in to a change process with both feet. And you can conceptualize there as being 5 different stops along the way to someone really hardwiring a change. The first is pre-contemplation, which is when you're not even thinking about change. Like if we use substance use examples, if someone, say, is using THC products, they're using marijuana on a daily basis, and they're saying like, well, yeah, why would I want to stop? I like it. It helps, in their mind, helps them manage their anxiety or something like that. That would be a pre-contemplative state of change. They're not even thinking about changing it. Contemplation is when they're thinking about it, but they haven't made the decision to do it yet. So someone who is in the more pre-contemplative stage might say, I use this to mellow out every day, but I don't actually, I'm still anxious all the time without it, or it's causing friction between me and my girlfriend, or it's causing school disciplinary issues, or it's really starting to add up because of how often I'm doing it, or I'm starting to notice that I'm just foggy a lot, or I've started driving while, people start thinking about change. They're not necessarily doing it yet, but they're thinking about it. Preparation is when someone has decided, I am going to make a change, but they haven't started yet. They're kind of gathering resources. Maybe they're looking for a therapist or a smartphone app or just some sort of support structure to help them in their change. But they haven't made that step yet to say, I'm going to cut back or I'm going to stop. Action is when you take action towards that change, and maintenance is when you've taken action for a while, and so it's not so much like I'm doing something new, it's how do I make this my new normal, right? And how do I stay there? Now, motivational interviewing, is about getting someone to go from one stage of change to the next. That's essentially what it's about. It's helping them bring themselves there if that's where they want to go. It's generally most useful in these first stages of change, though. In terms of people, if they are not motivated to make a change or they're thinking about it, like contemplation in particular, it's very useful, pre-contemplation as well. But we're usually thinking about leveraging in these skills and philosophies earlier on in the process of change. Not to say that you can't bring some of the skills to bear later on along the way. We'll talk about what that looks like. But a lot of times, if you're, say, like reaching into your toolbox of interventions as a therapist and thinking, okay, like based on meeting this client where they're at, what would be the most useful tool? MI oftentimes going to come to mind if you're seeing someone who's having a hard time connecting the dots between cause and effect around a habit or a behavior, substance use in this case, or if they're ambivalent about it, they don't know which way to go. Now, within this idea of stages of change, MI is specifically very useful for substance use disorders. And if anyone is in this field, addiction and substance use, I'm sure you've heard this before. And that's because ambivalence or resistance to change is a central feature of substance use disorders. It's something where I don't believe it's a diagnostic criteria in the DSM, but again, anecdotally, when you talk with folks who are at different stages along the way here, it's very tough for folks to get to a point where they're willing to engage with treatment or change. That's one of the reasons why when you look statistically at it, only about like say 10% of people with substance use disorders are getting treatment for it. Some of it has to do with like availability and payer structure and all that jazz. But some of it's just that they've got a diagnosable disorder, but they're not interested in pursuing it at this time. And the reason for that, there's a few reasons for this. And this is, again, where if someone is more contemplative, we can start to leverage these motivational skills. The first is that substance use disorders become someone's primary coping mechanism. And in many ways, that's the defining characteristic of what an addiction is. It's where it's not about having fun or just feeling pleasurable anymore. It's about the fact that you use this to get through your day. It's hard to imagine how you can deal with whatever it is you're trying to deal with, whether or not it's trauma or work stress or anxiety, whatever it is, without that intoxicant. It's very difficult to imagine doing that. And then you layer on top of it the fact that you potentially have developed a physiological dependency and you're going to go through withdrawal when you try to stop. That feels awful and uncomfortable. So it's not even just like you're going down to like baseline. Well, now I've got to deal with this emotional issue or situational issue without my substance. And I've got to go through withdrawal, which is very uncomfortable and very anxiety provoking for people to think about going through. In some cases, like with alcohol and benzodiazepines, it can just be straight up deadly if someone's not receiving care or supervision in some cases. So it's, that there's that layered on top. It may also have a social cost to change, right? If someone is hanging out in a group of friends where everybody vapes or everybody drinks or this is part of what they do, it might be very daunting to think like, do I have to get a whole new group of friends? That would not be, so there's just all of these extra reasons about like, why should I actually stop? Is this actually worth it to me? There's also an element where the substance use may be part of someone's sense of self, kind of like wine connoisseurs say, or we see this sometimes with marijuana or cannabis in the same sort of way, where people really, it's like part of how they see themselves is like, I am someone who does this, or I'm someone who consumes this product and who knows everything about it A to Z and will guide my friends along the way, or that sort of thing. It's very difficult. It's just this extra layer of ambivalence. If like maybe someone's looking at it with say wine and being like, wow, so like this is something that's always been a big part of my life, but now like my liver enzymes are elevated, or it seems like I really do, like I'm gaining a lot of weight because of all these calories I'm consuming, or I tend to get really angry, or whatever it is. It starts to be hard sometimes then to say, well, but then what if I can't deal with my stress? Or this has been like my hobby as well as more than a hobby perhaps for such a long period of time. It's hard to break away. So motivational interviewing is extremely useful because it helps someone figure out within themselves what they really want. And usually if they're in front of you, there's a reason for that comes from either inside of them, or maybe they're court mandated in some cases, but that obviously can be motivating in a way as well, a little less intrinsic that way. But if someone's coming to you for help, and particularly if they're identifying substances as part of the reason for that, then you usually got at least some members in there that that you can fan into flames if you go about it in the right way. And that's what MI is for. MI also can provide resources for coping with cravings, which is a big part of recovery and stopping using substances as well, because your body starts asking for the substance. And then you've got almost like these two opposing voices in your head. One that might be very biologically or psychologically driven that says, hey, you should go get a drink, or you should go smoke, you should go pick up. And then there's the other part that's like, yeah, but I actually like, this is hurting me. This is hurting me and this is not a net positive. And I don't want to, but that's who wins that fight has a lot to do with how motivated somebody is and how many tools they have as well. It's not just about motivation and like strength of will. There's a lot more to recovery than that. But certainly when you're having that internal battle, which happens a lot, knowing why you're doing what you're doing and feeling very convicted about that helps a tremendous amount.